Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Education, Libraries and Localism Cabinet panel. As you'll be aware, this is being broadcast live over the internet, and I welcome anybody and everybody who is sitting in and watching it as we go through. As a result of the coronavirus pandemic, the Council will be holding this meeting electronically in accordance with the relevant regulations. Members of the public may also attend this meeting in an electronic capacity, and there is a link on the Council's website for them to do so. Members of the Council are asked to keep their microphones switched off until called to speak, and to switch their microphones off once they have finished speaking. Cameras may be left on during the meeting if members wish. If you experience a connection or other technical issue, it may help to switch your camera off. Cameras should be switched on if and when speaking at the meeting. To indicate a wish to speak, members should use the raise hand function. Use of the meeting chat function is exclusively for voting, please. At the end of the debate on each item of business, there will be a vote. Members should vote using the meeting chat function by indicating for, against or abstain, and I will declare the result after each vote. There will be a break of 15 minutes approximately after every 2 hours, and will be taken after a speaker in the debate has finished speaking. If we are voting, the vote will be concluded before the break is taken. Other breaks will be incorporated as appropriate. I'm now going to ask each of the panel members just to briefly introduce themselves and say which division they represent and any other interest. So, Judy Billing, good morning.
Good morning, I'm Judy Billing and I represent Hitchin North Division. Thank you.
Annie Brewster.
Yes, good morning. I'm Annie Brewster, Conservative Councillor for Harpenden Rural. Good morning.
Thank you. Caroline Clapper.
Good morning. My name is Caroline Clapper. I'm the Councillor for Watling Division, which covers Radlett, Aldenham and Elstree. Thank you.
I'm not sure that Michael Hearn is with us yet. If he is, Michael? No. And likewise, I'm not sure whether Nick Hollinghurst is with us yet. Nick? No, I don't believe so. Jeff Jones.
Yeah, good morning, Jeff Jones, Conservative member for Buntingford.
Thank you. Asif Khan.
Good morning, member for North Watford.
Thank you. Mark Mills Bishop.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Mark Mills Bishop, Conservative member for Framstead End and Turnford and Deputy Chairman of this panel.
Thank you. Alan Plancy.
I'm the Alan Clancy Conservative member for Borehamwood South.
Anthony Rowlands.
Good morning. Anthony Rowlands, Lib Dem member for St Albans East.
Thank you, Anthony. Richard Thake.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Richard Thake, member for Nedworth and Codicut Division.
Thank you very much. And Mark Watkin.
Good morning, everybody. Mark Watkin, Lib Dem Opposition Spokesperson for Education and Children's Services and the member for Nascot Park Division in Watford.
Thank you very much, Mark. And I should have introduced myself. Apologies. I'm Terry Duris, Conservative, Cabinet Member for Education, Libraries and Localism and the member for Bridgewater. So thank you all very much indeed. We have no substitutions. Everybody is here apart from those who aren't here, I suppose. But we have no apologies to date, as that's my understanding. A reminder, please, for members' interests, that if you have a declarable pecuniary interest or a declarable interest, please mention it before we get to that particular item to which it relates. Can I now move to item 1, the minutes, and invite members to agree the minutes of the previous meeting, part 1, on the 16th of October 2020. If you could, rather than actually asking everybody to do it and vote, is there anybody who has any dissension to those minutes? No. On that basis, Stephanie, can we take it that there is agreement, NEMCON? Minutes agreed. Excellent, thank you very much. Item 2, public petitions. There are none notified. I'm now going to move to item 3, whether or not to approve the strategy to develop a county-wide pattern of specialist resource provision, otherwise known as SRP, in mainstream schools. And to introduce this, I believe we have Pauline Davis and Sally Glossop. Is that correct?
Yes, good morning, Terry. Sally speaking.
Good morning, Sally. Would you like to introduce this paper then, please?
So, good morning, everyone. So this paper is being presented to you for your consideration. What we have done is we've identified a gap in our provision. I think a number of you will be aware that we have a group of children with communication and autism who we don't currently have provision for. They can become a costly group because they often are we're having to look at provisions outside of the county, often independent provisions. And so what we want to do is create a graduated response for these young people so that we've got our universal offer where we offer support within their mainstream school, and then for this cohort, this is where we're asking you to think about are those children who need access to a mainstream curriculum but also need the nurture and support to help them to manage and develop the right skills so that they can realise their potential. Some may go on to university. What we want to do is identify these children at an early stage so that we prevent them becoming mentally ill or acute anxiety, disengaging from education. Our proposal is, and this is the first wave of the proposal, is that we focus on our secondary schools, and we will be proposing to open 3 in September 22, and the third will follow in September 23, because that will be in Avanti, which is a new school, and we want to give them a chance to settle. So we will then be looking at Longdean, Priory and Bushy Mead, so that we have an offer across the county, 20 places in each of those schools. There's a question, Terry.
No, I know what that's going to be, and I think it's Mark wishing to declare an interest. So Mark, do you want to?
Thank you very much, James. Sorry to interrupt you, Sally. I wasn't there. We should have done at the beginning. It just came too quickly for me. My daughter is a special needs teacher, actually at the Priory, so I have to declare an interest in this item.
Okay, thank you.
That's good. Thank you, Mark.
And forgive me as well, because I'm doing the bits that I thought Pauline was going to deliver, so I'm not as well rehearsed as I'd like to be.
I'm here.
Oh, you
if
are.
you need
Right, Pauline, I will hand to you then for the next stage.
Okay, Pauline, would you like to carry on?
Yes. So, as you know, changes to provision of this nature are significant changes which require a statutory process. So any change from this system to the existing system of speech and language bases to specialist resource provision across the county will require some statutory work. Both that will start with public consultation, and then the process changes after that in terms of which type of school it is. So for community and foundation schools, it will be the same processes that you're all aware of in the past, which is after public consultation, we will come back to you, give you the outcome of that consultation, and then we will seek approval to publish statutory notice. But for academies, the final decision is with the Regional Schools Commissioner, and each academy school will need to make a business justification to the Regional Schools Commissioner, but that will be based also on the outcome of the public consultation. So what we're seeking in this report is your agreement to this strategic change and to the public consultation across all of those schools for the next stage. So Sally will have explained to you, I'm sure, that we have children for whom existing provision in our mainstream schools cannot meet their needs, and yet these children should be in mainstream school with appropriate provision. At the moment, they are either going to independent provision or being allocated to special schools unnecessarily in order to have their needs met. So this is a really good strategy to improve local provision for those children, and we are proposing to introduce that in a phased way, starting with secondary provision and having one school in each of the 4 quadrants. You will see in the report that the implementation dates are from September 22 for 3 of the schools and September 23 for the 1 new school being built in Bishop Stortford. But we will consult on all 4 of those at this stage. The only other thing I will say to you at this point is that it will require some capital funding. There is money available for phase 1 within the specialist provision grant that government has made to the county council, and the money is already in the bank for that. But as normal, we will come back at the end of the consultation stage, and it will be at that stage that we will be seeking your formal approval to the funding. I'm sure if you've got any process questions or any questions about the children and the service to be provided, Sally will more than happily answer those.
Thank you very much indeed, Pauline. Sally, did you, I know I see Richard Thake's hand, but before I come to you, Richard, Sally, did you want to add anything at this stage?
No, I think that gives a good summary. I'm more than happy to answer any more questions if people have them.
I'm sure there will be some. I think the one thing that I would pick up is there's a reference at paragraph 4.7, noting the fact that the existing specialist language and communication needs schools have been involved in the development of this particular proposal. And also, if you look at the appendix, you'll see that the take-up of pupils in these current SLCN schools is quite low. So this is, if you like, a little bit of reorganisation to get the right distribution of service across the county, but also to provide the best facilities for the children who are currently at SLCN, and none of them are going to be disadvantaged by this change, but equally to get the maximum benefit and the maximum utilisation out of the new specialist resource provision. So having said that, let me go now to Richard Thake, who has a question or a comment. Please, Richard.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I mean, clearly this is a request to commence consultation, so we're not making any world-changing decisions at this minute in time. However, it occurs to me that Hitchin Boys School, Hitchin Girls School and the Priory School are in a consortium together. I don't think it has any impact at all, but in just for absolute transparency, I declare I'm a governor of Hitchin Boys School, so that I think, you know, I'm just trying to be absolutely transparent here. Chairman, I don't have a problem with this at all. In fact, it's something that we need to do, should be done, and I absolutely support it.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard. Anthony.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I mean, I understand the reasoning behind this. I think the report is very clear, and I can see and understand the logic. I've just got one question, and it's predicated on I hope the correct understanding that from what I think particular Sally was saying, that there's about 20 places at each of the secondary schools, that the students are in mainstream schools, but I assume travel to the centres for the specialist support. And I'm just wondering, going forward, with the proliferation of let's call it virtual systems to support teaching and guidance and advice and whatever, whether the experts feel that there may be more opportunity for, as well as some of these pupils, to receive the education that they need virtually, so that will preclude them having to travel and the disruption that might also involve in terms of their daily routine at school. I just wonder how they see the equation balancing out between, as it were, being at the centres and doing work remotely. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so they will, when they are attending their place at the specialist resource provision, they will be on the role of the specialist resource provision and access their learning in that school. So for example, if we take Longdean, they will be a safe space that will focus on the work on self-regulation, on anxiety, on overcoming fears, resilience in the base, so that you build up their capacity to access the learning within the mainstream lessons. So generally with a lot of children, you'd start with something like maths or science, because that's the thing that they're gripped by, and then you build up so that they're 80%. And at the end of each key stage, we would then review and say, are they ready to return to their local mainstream school, or will they continue in that school? The use of virtual learning would probably come at a lower. So if we think of the graduated response, so we've got those young people with this kind of profile managing quite well. Then we've got those that have the need for more intervention. That would be where we would focus on the virtual learning. This stage would be where we have young people who need some micro support as well, where they need that intense support. And we build on that profile, and then as we continue, then we look at our new free school that we will be having, and then we have that final top end of children who end up at places like Roman Fields, where we have to do even more intense work, particularly around mental health. So this is part of a very graduated offer that we haven't had in Hertfordshire before for this type of child, and it sits, if it helps, it sits within that continuum. So that virtual element will I think now a virtual element of learning will contribute to all across that graduated process. But these young people will be in that school, and then we always strive to get them back within their local community, because of the importance of relationships in your local area. But at the moment, these young people are going as far as Cambridge and Hampshire. We need to bring them back to the local area.
And I think that.
Thank you.
Sorry, Anthony.
No, I was just going to say thank you very much for that comprehensive answer. I entirely understand the picture you're painting, and grateful for the initiative.
And I think, if I may, if I can pick up on the very last thing that Sally said, which is the reduction in the need to transport or have children transported miles in certain cases to a more appropriate, as it is the case at the moment, facility. If we can actually keep them in Hertfordshire, that has to be a benefit for everybody. And the other thing I think that I would just pick up, if I may, is that this item it's right where it is in the agenda, but it also, if you look at the next agenda item, you will see reference to SRPs in the special school place plan, because it all feeds in as part of a coordinated approach as we move forward. But enough from me. Mark Watkin.
Oh, thank you very much, Terry. Yes, first of all, pardon me, I really welcome this. Historically, there has been this gap between bright children who can't access the curriculum, particularly in secondary schools, because just can't adjust to the sort of the feel of a secondary school, and then the sort of despair of where do they go next, because they can't work in a secondary school, and there didn't seem to be anything other than the learning difficulty schools as being the other option, which frankly would not stimulate them and would not have been really appropriate for them. So this absolutely fills a gap. But I do have a number of questions, if you'll allow me. I think what I wanted to ask, first of all, is when you look at the pattern at the moment, most of the existing provision is in the primary sector. And I think only 2 schools, I've just gone, let me go back to the appendix, but only 2 schools are actually secondary. And I worked it out, there are 32 places in the existing secondary sector, and even those are not fully taken up. Whereas the primary sector is very well, not relatively well provided. So I was just trying to understand how that's going to work then. Are we going to, suddenly open up the doors and all these people who've not been around are suddenly going to be able to go into secondary? First question. Second, if I may, just to understand slightly more about the relationship between these bases and their host school. I must admit, from the briefing, I obviously got a wrong impression. I thought a child almost applied to it, a transfer, and largely stayed there during the time in the school. But the way Sally's just painted it, and it makes a lot of sense, is that they're there until they are suitably prepared to handle a normal secondary school, if I can use that term. So presumably there will be people, education healthcare plans will determine when a child will go in, assuming there's a place available in year 9 or year 10, for example. So can we just get clarity about that? Mark,
I want to just pause there. Mark, do you want to just pause there?
I do.
And let Sally come back with answer those 2 questions, and then I'll come back to you.
Okay, so a bit hazy on the first question because I thought I didn't write it down as quickly as. So
I can repeat it quickly, Sally.
Do the first one again. I've got the second one. I can answer the second, but it's the first one.
The first one is when you look at the current system, it's very focused on the primary sector. I mean, how many are there? About.
I'm okay now. I can do it now.
And then only 2 secondary, and even those are undersubscribed. But what you're suggesting to us, and I'm not arguing in principle, I just want to understand it, is that you're putting investment significantly into the secondary sector, so presumably leaving the primary sectors not yet, provided for. Well, that's a slightly prejudicial term. But why have you focused in on the secondary sector, but not so much on the primary?
So at the moment, that's where the huge gap is. And as you said, we've got at the 2 SLCN bases, one not used very well at all, and one that could have been used better because the focus has been on children with speech language communication need. Those young people tend to manage in their mainstream settings. There's not the need or request from a SEND perspective. It's the children with the communication and the anxiety and autism that are the gap that we've identified. And I take you back, we had an autism strategy where we clearly identified this gap, parallel to a speech and language work stream and strategy where we were noticing that we needed to do something different. And we've now looked at this, really thoroughly interrogated where the need is. And this is the gap, and this is the costly gap to the local authority. So what we've done is look at particularly what ages and stages. There are flashpoints. There's a flashpoint at year 9, which is one where we lose a number of young people from a mainstream setting to a very highly costly out-of-county provision, or we lose them completely as they disengage in learning. So that was why we really wanted to focus on the secondary provision. You're correct. Our primary schools with our SLCN bases have been able to be more adaptable, and they have a number of the children that are in those SLCN bases at the moment will fit the same admissions criteria as we go forward for our communication and autism bases. So they're changing in cohort won't really impact that much on the difference, except that we will be making them bigger. For the main, they will all be for 12. The reason why we've delayed it is purely because of making sure that we get the numbers exact right and we get all of those bases in the right position, so we have the fair access across the county. As far as admissions and exit criteria, we will have a very strong and robust admissions criteria that will, what the ambition is that those people who are heads and leads of these bases will be part of that admission and exit panel process, so that young people aren't held back or delayed in their entry. So if they're entering and making good progress, what we're saying is we would review that at each key stage, so that there is no sense in moving a young person from year 10 to another base, and then so we would be moving them at the end of key stage 3, which is end of year 9, at year 7 as they enter into secondary school, at key stage 1 and key stage 2, so that we're really looking at each individual and making sure that this is robust. What we've got to do, what I think will be the challenge for us, is protecting the type of young person that goes into that school and not using them as a simple solution. So that's why we've really focused on that admission and exit criteria, so that we can be sure that that's robust, but also the people running them have the say in who's in there.
Sally, that's been Mark, if I may come back, sorry, no?
Yeah, Mark, yep. Just before I come back to you for another question, can I just ask Anthony Rowlands? Anthony, please forgive me, but you're moving around quite a lot, and your camera is on, and
okay.
I'm personally finding it a little bit disconcerting. So forgive me. Thank you very much indeed. It's much appreciated. Mark, would you?
Yes,
you want to come back to either something that Sally had said on your next questions?
Yeah, well, fine. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Sally. I think that's been very helpful. Just out of interest, then, so a child, a student or a pupil at these centres at the Priory, would they become Priory pupils while they're there? Would they wear the Priory uniform? Because you said something about going back to their host school, and that slightly confused me, which is why I want clarification on this relationship. Where do they feel they belong, basically?
Yeah. So if we use what we want is that the young people become part of the school community. So we've been very clear as we've been looking around at where we cite the SRPs, is that they are at the heart of each of the schools. They will wear so at the Priory they would wear Priory uniform. They would be part of the Priory community, because what we don't want is an isolated base attached to a secondary school will not fulfil the outcomes that we want from these provisions. That they need to be in the heart, because we're building up that resilience of being able to access a mainstream learning environment. So when I say return to their community, that's as and when it's appropriate. So that's when we've done such a fantastic job, they no longer need the support of a base. So they move down that. So we've talked about that graduated response. We've done that targeted piece of work. We've slipped them back into their mainstream. They have that targeted support, or we've done such a good job, they go back to that universal offer on that graduated response. So we think of it as a revolving door. But what we don't want to do is have a scattergun approach to that, which is why I've been very clear we would make those decisions at key stage transition points.
Thank you, Terry. I think that's very helpful. I won't ask any more. I feel I've rather dominated this, but that's very encouraging, and I'm more than happy to support the plan.
Thank you very much indeed. Good to hear. Judy Billing.
Thank you very much. What I most welcome is the widest possible continuum. Can you have a wide continuum? The longest possible continuum, I suppose, of provision, particularly for children with autism, because autism is an incredibly long continuum itself. Working with children who can benefit hugely from most of their education in mainstream to those who can't at all. And so I really welcome this. I have to put in a bit of personal here, because I have a grandson with autism who is currently doing his MA in history at Glasgow University, having been in mainstream in Hertfordshire throughout his schooling and fantastically well looked after at Highfield School for secondary education in Letchworth. I've mentioned this before, and I will continue to do so. On the other hand, the vast majority of my casework that I deal with in the County Council is with parents concerned about their children very often with autism issues, and feeling that only special education will be of any benefit to them at all. And that saddens me sometimes, because I think some of those children lose out by not having the opportunity of mainstream schooling. And I think to go now to consultation on this plan does broaden the possibility of what we're able to offer, and I welcome it very much. I don't prejudge the outcome, but I very much welcome the consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you very much indeed, Judy. Mark Mills Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ought to make a declaration of interest, I suppose. My wife is a primary school teacher in Broxbourne, and my son a head primary in Welling Hatfield. I echo what's been said by my colleagues, and I 100% endorse the proposals. And I think Pauline, Sally, you've done a great report here. So high praise for you. There was only one thing, and it's a clarification on Appendix 1 that perhaps you could help me with. And on Appendix 1, they talk about Flamstead End School in St Albans. Is that Flamstead School in St Albans or Flamstead End School in my division in Broxbourne?
It's Flamstead End in Broxbourne.
So that's a mistake on the paper.
And I can't believe I didn't spot that. So.
Actually, we had spotted it, but it slipped through. But that's always the case of Flamstead End.
Yeah. My apologies, because I typed that up, and I think it was not intentional, because I know exactly where that school is. It's Sam Young speaking here, Mark. I'll make sure that's corrected.
Yeah, hi Sam. Yeah, just to make sure before it goes out for consultation. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
We'll pick that up. Yeah, that's for sure. Anthony, you're coming back.
I put my hand down, Terry.
Oh, your hand is still showing.
Oh, it's off. My apologies then.
Okay, don't worry. Well, have another go at putting it. You've gone. Right. Okay. Right. I'm not seeing any other hands. So unless anybody has got anything else to add. Pauline, did you have anything else to add at all?
No, Terry.
No. In which case, I think we can. I'm just going to ask Stephanie, whether we need to go to a formal vote, because my feeling, and I'm very happy to, but my feeling is that we have got unanimity on this. Stephanie?
Yeah, if we could please still use the chat to record the vote, because it's down as well. Okay,
all right, so you do need to vote. That's fine. So if you can go to the chat and agree or for, against, all. I have a suspicion I know what the answer is going to be. Pauline, you've still got your hand up, by the way.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I never. Thank you, Stephanie. Item 3 is agreed unanimously. Thank you very much indeed. Let's now move on to item 4, which is whether or not to approve the special educational needs and disabilities SEND special school place planning strategy for 2020 to 2023. And I think I would just introduce this by saying that the actual cabinet panel paper is brief, but the real detail is actually in the strategy plan, which I'm not sure whether Sam is going to introduce this or Pauline's going to. They'll probably both be involved, but Sam is indicating so.
No, I think it's Simon actually.
Simon, is it Simon? Simon's going to introduce it. Okay, all right. Welcome, Simon.
Yeah. Yes, it is in fact me, Terry. But of course, the two people most involved in the kind of production of it are Sam and Sally Glossop. So I'm sure that when we come to questions, they will be well into the debate. So I'm sure members are well aware of the pressure of demand for special places, and indeed we talked about that, and we talked about the continuum of provision under the last item. So we've all been acutely aware of growing demand for special places in recent years. And in response to that, we commissioned a consultant who'd undertaken similar review projects in other authorities to review and to forecast the demand for places in the county in various need categories over the next sort of medium-term future. So that consultant produced an analysis for us, and that was validated internally. And that has led to the projections of increased demand, or in some sectors not increased demand, that are built into the plan that's before you. And those projections are kind of consistent with our year-to-year experience of growing demand. And in the paper it refers to how we've put in over 200 additional places in the last couple of years. And it's also consistent with our inter-authority benchmarking, which suggests that we do have a relatively low number of special school places compared with our statistical neighbours. So the conclusions of the forecasting work that we've done around the need for new provision is not entirely surprising. And because we've now come to the point where our existing special school estate is very difficult to expand in the ways that we need it to meet the demand, that's led to our assessment that we will probably need, or we will need, some new schools to meet the demand for places, particularly in the SLD PNI area, where we think we'll likely need 2 new schools, and also in the communication and autism area, where we think we need a primary school to complement the secondary school that's being built under the Free Schools programme in Welling. But the paper that we've put in front of you is not, if you like, answering the question about will we need X school or will we need Y school and where will they be. This paper is the strategy which establishes the demand for places in the medium term. And we recognise that the costs of new special school provision are very, very high, a considerable challenge for the council in the current circumstances. But fortunately, one of the features of the autumn statement was the announcement by the government of around £300 million for capital expenditure on special educational needs. So we think there's a possibility that there will be a further wave of special free schools. The same kind of programme that has given us the one that's being constructed in Welling at the moment. So by creating and approving this strategy, this should A, provide us with a basis for the site search work, which is continuing about where we should locate new establishments. B, it provides us with a platform, an evidence base and a case that we will want to use when bidding for new capital finance from government. And C, it incidentally provides us with a platform for seeking Section 106 contributions from new housing developments, something that's difficult if you don't have a clear-cut strategy and some proposals. So there's a whole set of reasons why we're taking this strategy forward, and why in due course the next stage will be some specific proposals. But that's all I really wanted to say about it at the moment. There's a great deal of detail within the strategy document, and I'm sure you'll have questions for myself, Sam or Sally. Thank you.
Just before we do come, I mean, I have to say, I think that the strategy document is an excellent piece of work, but it also graphically demonstrates the need for it and the pressure that we are going to face going forward, and the importance of providing the right facilities for our young people in that context. Before I take questions, Sam and Pauline, did you want to add anything at this stage?
Not from me, Terry, no.
No. Sam?
Not from me, Terry. I'll await any questions and help if I can.
Okay. Anthony, your hand is up. Is it a new question?
It's a question.
Yep, please.
So it's a fairly straightforward question. There may be a blindingly obvious answer, but I'll ask the question anyway.
Please do.
The question is, why is the consultation dated 2020 to 2023 when we're within 3 weeks of the end of 2020 and it's going out to consultation?
Okay, so it's not going out for consultation. Actually, it's not a consultation document. I think the reason I've dated it 2020 to 2023 was because I envisage this being an annual document. So it's the 2020 version of what will be an annual rolling programme. So every year, so next year we'll have a 21 to 24. So it's not an isolated piece of work that will just sit there historically and 10 years ago we did a strategy. Do you remember? It's going to be a rolling, living thing. So that was my theory.
And Anthony, it is based on a 2020 forecast.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
And of course, in the document itself, in each of the various areas, P&I and so on, it demonstrates the numbers in the individual schools, but also the expectation of numbers in the years coming along. So I think that's one of the things that I mentioned earlier about it's how graphic that is.
Thank you for the clarification.
Does that answer your question, Anthony?
Yes, it does. Thank you for the clarification.
Oh, you're very welcome. Do we have any other questions or anybody wanting to make any comments? I have a suspicion, Anthony, you've oh no, we're all right, we're back again. A flurry. Right, Mark, please.
Well, I welcome this wholeheartedly. Having been around a few years and been very involved with SEND and education in a political sense, I have seen this authority move from what appeared to be a sort of blinkered view, keep your head down and hopefully the problems will go away, to and I'm sorry if I'm being prejudicial in that, but I think that in the last few years there's been a complete cultural change about helping schools with exceptional needs funding being logical, and now this stage being looking much more closely and beginning to really get to grips with the breadth of need of our children and being able to focus in a much better way than I've ever seen before in meeting that need. And so I wholeheartedly welcome this. And I was delighted to hear that this is not a static document that we put away and then we'll all think, oh, do we remember back in 2020 when we discussed this? The fact that it's going to be part of the moving programme is absolutely core to making sure that this authority keeps its eye on the ball and is therefore able to reflect the changing circumstances of our children. New needs will develop, I fear, or at least some needs will grow, some needs will reduce. So having this as a constant review is excellent. And really, I don't have a great many questions to ask because they're either you drill down to every single area and I'd bawl for Britain in terms of asking very detailed questions. I just think that the whole approach is to be welcomed. And again, as with the previous item, I should be very happy to support it and look forward to seeing how the planning is then delivered into actual delivery. That's, of course, the big challenge, where these schools will be and how this need will be met. But if we don't have a structure to work around, then we're not even at the starting line. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I think what I would just add that we are very conscious of the need to tap into whatever government funding is available. But also we have an absolute determination to provide these schools and these facilities for our young people. And so if we will find the money to make sure that these schools are developed, we have to. Judy.
Thank you, Chair. If Mark's not going to bore for Britain, it's incumbent on me not to do so either. I've already made the point once this morning about the enormous amount of casework that I have dealt with families and children with special educational needs since I became a county councillor, and sometimes the enormous frustrations of matching parental aspiration with children's needs with what's available. So I also welcome this. My wholeheartedness is just slightly dampened by the fact that, from my point of view, I would very much like all this provision to be a local education authority provision rather than free school provision. That's the only point I'd make. I think the local education authority knows best about the needs and delivery for our children. And I wish we could at least go back to having schools that were local authority schools rather than whatever a free school weirdly calls itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. That's a debate for another day, whenever that may be. Right, Nick Hollinghurst.
Thank you. I wholeheartedly support all of this. And the comments made by Mark. I would also say that I do support Judy's last few comments. I have to say that I'm not a councillor who's made a great contribution to this subject. We all have our specialist subjects. It's such a broad scope, and this wasn't one of mine. But I am well aware of the problems that we've had in the past. And my suggestion is that because in the nature of things, SEN provision affects young people and their families over periods of sometimes decades. We are embarking on a series of improvements with, unfortunately, some historical baggage behind us, and a lot of people who are still feeling very much let down by what happened maybe 10 years ago. So my suggestion is that we do put in a bit of publicity into this new approach and these new plans, especially with the provision of new schools. I think it would be in everybody's interest that this positive and forward-looking programme that we now have got is given some publicity. If only to reassure people who might be overly influenced by the historical situations.
Thank you, Nick. I understand what you're saying about historical situations, but I'm not dismissing any of those. But I do think we have to look forward, and I'm hugely enthused and grateful to officers and colleagues who have put this plan together, and likewise I'm very pleased to be the executive member for education, to hear what Sam has said, that it's a living document, and we need to recognise this because it is such an important feature, and we do have such an important role to play for the benefit of our young people. Now and indeed in the future. I'm quite sure that I believe that we have our local Democratic reporter watching in and listening in, so I'm quite sure that she will be picking up all of these things that have been said across the floor, and what I hope will be a unanimous decision to approve the recommendation, which, if I may, I would just confirm, and that is that the panel is asked to recommend to Cabinet that it approves the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities SEND Special School Place Plan 2020 to 2023. If you would be kind enough to vote for, against or abstain, please. I rather feel I know what's going to come, and item 4 has been agreed. Thank you all very much indeed. And I think I can only repeat what I've said. Such an important piece of work, and I'm delighted that we have unanimity. So thank you all again. Let's now move on to item 5, the Sustainable Hertfordshire Strategy, the action plan, which is going to be introduced by Julie Greaves. And I would, of course, mention that this plan is going to all the Cabinet panels, because it is an important piece of work for our future, and it involves every panel and indeed every sector of the County Council will have an involvement in this. So Julie, if you are here.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Chair. Good morning.
I'm not quite sure how many times you've made this presentation, but we'll see if we perhaps can come up with some interesting new questions, perhaps. But please do introduce it.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair, and good morning, panel, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. I have a short PowerPoint presentation to take members through the documents because they are fairly lengthy and cumbersome. So I'll just share my screen. So you have the panel paper before you today, and Appendix A of that particular panel paper is the action plan itself. And the presentation, we're going to specifically look at education, libraries and localism in terms of the portfolio area and aspects that are attributable to that area. So very briefly, the story so far, as I'm sure you are aware, the County Council unveiled its new corporate plan excuse me, and also declared a climate emergency in July 2019. Alongside that declaration was the commitment to prepare the Sustainable Hertfordshire strategy by the end of that year. The strategy was prepared and was then approved at Cabinet in March this year. And upon approving that particular strategy, it was said that the strategy then needed a detailed action plan to be able to implement all the ambitions that are set out within the strategy itself. In terms of the strategy, it covers 3 circles of influence in order for us to lead, enable and inspire. In terms of lead, that means a leader in our own operations, so how we manage our estate and how we manage our services and how we engage with our staff and how we use our own buildings and looking at energy as well. And then much wider aspects than that in terms of enabling through our policies and programmes, and also being an inspiration to others, so much wider than our own operations, enabling and inspiring all of the residents of Hertfordshire and also businesses and other stakeholders to change the way that they're working and behave more sustainably and respond to climate change. So the action plan that you have at Appendix A is very comprehensive. We had over 400 actions put forward, and we've had to assess all of those actions, look at them in detail, consolidate them, rationalise them, and then that has given us the 200 actions that are currently being taken through the panel process at the moment. And those actions have been categorised. We've got some quick wins, which are to be delivered within existing resources, and they are set out pages 7 to 12 and 27 of Appendix A. We've got key works programmes that we're hoping to deliver over the next 1 to 5 years, and they will need to be subject to further investigation in order to implement them. And they are set out in pages 13 to 24 and 27 to 30 in the Appendix A. And then moving forward into the future, we've got future works programmes, and these are very large items potentially in terms of cost, but also potentially in terms of their carbon impacts. And we need to do full scoping to understand what the cost might be and what the implications might be in terms of carbon reduction, for example. And they're set out in pages 24 to 26 and 31 to 32 of Appendix A. And then in order to give the full picture of what's going on across the whole of the authority, we've also got an appendix to the action plan, which looks at actions that are essentially business as usual. And the reason for that is to give a full overview of everything that the County Council is already doing, as well as what we're planning to do in the future. And in terms of feedback that we've had from the previous panels, just to note that the business as usual has now been caveated that we may need to adapt our business as usual processes in light of climate change impacts. And then Appendix B to the report is the web-based version, and this is a much less detailed, easy read version of the detailed action plan. And the reason for that is that we felt that the detailed action plan was very much for members to see all of the information and all of the detail and the individual actions that we'd looked at, and that's then can be used by officers in terms of their future work programmes and putting in their own service delivery plans. But the web-based version is much more high level, less detailed, and has some infographics in it as well. And the idea is that that action plan will then be placed on our Sustainable Hertfordshire web pages to sit alongside the strategy. Of the 200 actions that are listed, we have identified 19 actions that are real priorities because we need to do those to enable us to carry out further actions. So those actions have been highlighted and duplicated in pages 4 to 6 of the action plan itself. And then each action also has a proposed lead portfolio. And this is why I have been presenting to every single portfolio over the last couple of months, because all of the actions are relevant to everybody, but we need to give a lead portfolio so that there's accountability to those actions and that we can feed back in terms of implementation. So specifically relating to education, libraries and localism, I've just pulled out some of the actions here that are relevant to this portfolio. So, for example, including sustainability criteria in new school sponsorship competitions, making sure we improve knowledge and awareness around sustainability and also biodiversity, and ensuring costs associated with any new infrastructure, we can actually put forward relevant funding bids through Section 106 or Community Infrastructure Levy, and also lobbying DFE to make sure we are getting sufficient money to be able to progress carbon neutral developments. There are also a lot of actions relating to schools, and the reason for this is that we have a large school portfolio in terms of the HCC estate, and they do contribute quite a lot to our carbon emissions. So there's lots of actions relating to schools. So, for example, there you've got the pilot scheme with regard to new two-form entry first school being net zero carbon. Also another pilot scheme looking at the top 100 schools to try and improve their energy efficiency, for example, and looking at energy reduction measures much more widely across all of the HCC school estate. Further actions relating to schools, looking at heating electrification, looking at the fabric that we've used to build those buildings and whether or not we need to look at retrofitting some of that. Implementing anti-idling campaigns around schools, that's in relation to air quality and emissions. Engaging with schools to promote the green agenda more generally, and that's around school buildings, but also around pupils and staff and parents as well. And also looking at water efficiency, we have the opportunity to help all of the schools look at their water consumption and also provide them with opportunities to reduce that water consumption. And then again, looking at air quality audits around schools. Moving on to something that's relating to waste and bulk purchasing. Again, this is about increasing resource efficiency. So, can we help schools be a little bit more effective in their use of supplies by helping them share supplies, like for example through the scrap stores, and then also bulk purchasing in terms of waste recycling options. So, can we help them to consolidate their collections, for example, so that they can recycle more at source. And again, there's some more in there about community engagement and awareness and working with Waste Aware, and then also looking at travel. So, for example, our home to school transport and people with special educational needs being kept within the county in terms of the provision that's offered to them to reduce transport costs and also transport emissions. And then generally raising awareness and locking in the potential positives that we've seen through the COVID situation with regard to behavioural changes in terms of active travel, for example. In addition to this, there are lots of actions that will need support from education libraries and localism, and I've pulled out a few there in general terms around looking at carbon footprint, promoting biodiversity, making sure that we are raising awareness and educating people around climate change implications, for example, looking at electrification and renewables, and also looking at transport in terms of replacing our own fleet as a first port of call, and then generally around sustainable procurement and looking to pursue things like paperless office and better waste disposal, etc. So those are the actions that are relevant to the actual portfolio and where we would need help from this particular portfolio area. With regard to the timeline, this is the final panel actually today. I will have presented to all of the Cabinet panels. We have taken on board the comments that have been received from those panels, and then the action plan will be presented to Cabinet on the 14th of December and County Council on the 15th of December. And then it's hoped that the action plans will be fully implemented across all of the service areas. They will have the duty to implement all of the actions, and then we will need to report back to panels as we're progressing on the overarching ambitions as well as the individual actions themselves. Oops. So in terms of the recommendations, very, very briefly summarise the recommendations because there are lots of them, and I'm sure, Chair, you'll go through them at the end anyway. Noting Appendix A to the action plan as business as usual, with the caveat that we may need to adapt some of those, agree the quick wins, works programmes and also future works programmes so that we can fully implement the Sustainable Hertfordshire strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Julie. Okay, so I've got some hands up, and let me start with Anthony Rowlands, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, I mean, it's entitled Action Plan, and it's clearly an enormously important initiative. I've just got three questions, Chair. One is just to inquire. This is a work, and I'm really grateful to Julie for her presentations. I've now heard the three panels that I'm a member of. I just ask, what is the level of dedicated resource that's been made available for the coordinated taking forward of this work? And a related second question on, more specifically on education. I mean, we don't need to rehearse the importance of sustainability and everything that the plan is about, and the enthusiasm that there would be within our schools. That's well known and well documented. But it's like rather disconcerted in terms of, I think, the original first part of the report, page 56, in terms of engagement. Then later, I think, when it talks about education, and rhetorically asked what is being done, and the phrase that is used is evidence gathering, which is a bit of a response. That's my second question.
And Anthony,
Yep.
I don't know whether it's at my end or whether it's others are experiencing it, but you seem to be breaking up. And Julie is nodding her head. So would you mind just repeating that last question, because I don't think we necessarily got the full thrust of it.
Okay, tell me if you don't hear me, because obviously I realise that's very irritating. It's really the question about what are we doing in terms of engagement, because the commentary suggests that really hasn't been taken forward. Is that better?
Yep, no, that was fine. Thank you.
Right. The third question, if I may, while I'm speaking, and this came up yesterday when both I is on the panel as well.
Again, Anthony, we're losing you again. I'm so sorry. Anthony, would you, if it's a shortish question, do you want to try and put it in chat and I'll read it out for you?
I'll put it in chat.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
Thanks. And I'll read it out on your behalf.
I can answer the first 2 points whilst Anthony's typing. In terms of resources, we do now have the Sustainable Hertfordshire team. It's a new team. We've been in post since the 1st of April this year, so we've been solidly working on Sustainable Hertfordshire since then, and we do have resources attributed to us to be able to deliver on the action plan, and we are going through due process in terms of the IP bids, seeking more resources to be able to help us to further take forward the action plan as well. In terms of communication and engagement, you're absolutely right. We wanted to do a lot more, and I think that you'll be fully aware that the strategy itself was approved at Cabinet in March, and the 2 items on that agenda were response to COVID and Sustainable Hertfordshire, and it meant that we couldn't do anything relating to Sustainable Hertfordshire once straight after the strategy had been approved. We have now managed to do quite a lot in terms of publicising the strategy itself. We do now have our own dedicated web pages, microsite called Sustainable Hertfordshire, and there's lots of information on there, and also the strategy itself, and we'll be putting the action plan on those particular pages. We've also engaged with young people via YC Hearts, and that's been really successful. We were able to engage with a lot of young people via YC Hearts, and my staff pulled together a really good YouTube video of their thoughts and their feelings around climate change and sustainability, and that's on our web pages, and that was presented to the Hertfordshire Forward Conference. We do still want to do much more, and we specifically do want to engage directly with schools, but we just haven't had the opportunity to do that yet. We have a specific comms plan that's being pulled together at the moment with help from comms and also Hearts for Learning, because we do want to engage with schools via the different networks and via the heads networks, etc. We've been invited to a meeting, I think January, we have been invited to a meeting of the governors, and so we will be presenting to them about our strategy moving forwards. But I think it's fair to say that the schools have been extremely busy tackling COVID and dealing with that particular situation, and it was felt very much that we should just leave them alone to deal with that particular piece of work. Having said that, we desperately want to engage with them. We know that the impetus is there, and the feeling around this agenda is definitely there, and we are engaging where we can, where they have contacted us, and then we will do that much more widely over the next year, definitely. And your third question?
The third question, if I can just jump in here before I read Anthony's third question, and I fully appreciate what you've said about the pressure on schools, head teachers, etc. As a result of COVID-19, but this sustainable strategy is now in the public arena. And we also hear what you've said, and we endorse what you've said, that it will need to come to schools, because schools will have to consider the ways that they can actually contribute to these environmental issues and the sustainability issues. So I thought I'd just put that in. It's not through any antipathy towards the strategy. It's just that I know how heavily burdened particularly head teachers are and their senior team are at the present time. Anthony's third question was, or is, anti-idling signage at schools. Historically, Department for Transport have resisted. Has that now changed? Annie Brewster provided an example of another local authority which had taken positive steps, and can Herts schools now do so? Now, I know that Annie Brewster is a member of this panel, so before I go to the next question, after you've answered this one, I'll perhaps ask Annie Brewster if she wants to contribute anything on that particular point, as Anthony has mentioned her name.
Okay.
So, Julie.
Yes, this was raised yesterday at the panel that I attended yesterday, specifically relating to public health and prevention. And both Bethan and I contacted our colleagues in Highway straight away, and they've provided us with lots of information about the campaigns that they've already run at schools via Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, in terms of online campaigns and posters and leaflets, etc. We have also asked the question around the signage issue, and we await a response in terms of whether or not DFT have been positive or will be more positive moving that particular issue forward. So we have got a lot of information that we asked for yesterday to answer this particular question. And yes, Annie provided us with the details of that other authority, which is really, really helpful. And we'll share that with our colleagues in Highways as well. So I know that Simon Aries has joined the call. I wondered whether he wanted to come in and say anything around his particular area.
I think you said most of it, Julie, but it's worth saying the campaigns involve temporary signage. I think Councillor Rowland's talking about permanent and Councillor Brewster, I'm guessing, but we do use temporary signage. Interestingly, we use school children quite often to challenge parents, and that's worked really well. And that seems to be a good tactic. We don't just leave them by themselves to challenge parents, of course, they're supervised, but that has been a really good example of anti-idling campaign. But yes, as Julie said, we can follow up on more permanent signage with DFT.
Thank you, Simon. I know that we do have some hands up, but I did say that I would come to Annie Brewster if she wanted to add something to it, as Anthony had particularly mentioned her. Annie?
Yeah. I'll be delighted, Chair. Yeah, as sad as I am, I was walking through Putney and went past a school and saw these signs, got so excited. So I rang up the Borough of Wandsworth to find out how they'd managed it. And I found some details here about it. And these are very attractive signs. They're only about the size of the neighbourhood watch type ones that one sees on lampposts. And they weren't excessive. I think this is important. I said this to Anthony. The school only had 2. So I think this is one of the concerns, that one doesn't want to actually, cover our pavements and highways with lots of ugly signs. But something as important as this, just that little reminder for parents in their cars seems jolly sensible. So I hope you can work with Wandsworth and see how they did it and see if we can do the same. Thank you.
And in a way, when you talk about highways and street furniture, it's a question of priorities, and probably very little trumps the need for recognition of a sustainable future in the county and in the country and in the world. Nick Hollinghurst, I've kept you waiting. Apologies.
That's okay. That was very interesting what Annie was saying. Now, every time the matter of schools comes up in relation to climate emergency and saving carbon dioxide, I keep suggesting that schools, surrounded as they usually are by large playing fields, open land, car parks, etc., areas of flat ground with no buildings on them, they lend themselves to ground source heating. And as a practical example, Three Rivers District Council and the associated police station there in the same building derive much of their heating, certainly the background heating, from ground source coils in the World War I Memorial Rose Garden, which now it's all been done, looks exactly as it looked beforehand. So I think we're missing an opportunity, and I have to say I'm getting slightly irritated that my suggestion, which I do feel is sensible and rational, has, after 3 times I've raised this, it's still not in the Environmental Action Plan. And I put in a 4th plea. Please, can we take seriously ground source heating for background heat in buildings surrounded by open spaces, particularly schools, and County Hall as well, for that matter. Okay, that's my 4th plea.
Okay, it makes me almost feel a bit like taking some examinations, professional examinations, when I was younger, that if you failed for the first 8 times, you automatically got it on the 9th time. But Julie, you've heard Nick's impassioned plea. What response do you have for that?
The reason that we haven't specifically said ground source heat pumps is because the actions are much broader than that in terms of looking at alternative options. In the same way, for fleet, we haven't said we need to look at hydrogen. We do need to look at hydrogen, but we need to look at all sorts of other things as well, including biodiesel and electric, etc. So there isn't a specific line which talks about ground source heat pumps or air source heat pumps or photovoltaics, for example. But that is definitely something that we would want all of our work to look at in terms of an option. Installing ground source heat pumps retrospectively is very expensive, and it would be better done on new developments because you are already digging the foundations and the footings, etc. I think that it would be a case of definitely on a case-by-case basis and looking at a school. As you said, if they've got suitable space, then that would be the first starting point, and also in terms of resources. And it would be something that we'd like to seek via the decarbonisation fund, for example, as one of the options that we could look at. I think the first thing, the important thing to say, though, if we are looking at putting something like that into an existing older school, we'd need to look at the fabric of the building first, because it doesn't matter what kind of heating process you have if the school isn't well enough insulated, etc. So we'd need to, that's why the action in the action plan talks about fabric first. So we need to look at the school building itself first to make sure that that's fully insulated, isn't losing heat in any particular way that we could stop it. Before then, you look at renewables and other sources of heat and energy in terms of renewables via electrification, for example. So it isn't specifically mentioned, but it definitely is in there as an option to look at.
Promise.
And of course, Julie, you mentioned it in passing. We have our new pilot school in Buntingford, the 2FE first school, which presumably, well, is going to be a net zero carbon. So it will have all of those facilities built in as part of the development. I think the other thing in terms of development, and again, you alluded to it, is actually getting an update of BB 103, the building design brief, if you like, from the Department for Education, which I think is probably going to come before the end of next year, but it is still going to look retrospectively, possibly, because it's that informs the local planning authority on their negotiations for Section 106 contributions, and the additional cost of a sustainable school or net zero carbon school is not insignificant, and somewhere along the line we have to get that money, whether it be from developers or not. And just while I've got the talking spoon, if I may, you've mentioned about retrofitting in schools. A number of village schools have got high vaulted roofs and so on, and I mused with you when we were having a discussion earlier that if you could put all the desks sort of 10 foot in the air where the heat rises or the hot air rises, that would be great. But of course, heating a school with a vaulted roof is not easy. Well, it is easy, but it's not very efficient. Nick, do you want to come back on a comment, because I realise I've stolen a bit of Chairman's privilege here, and you've indicated, but is it in relation to what you previously said, or is it a new item?
Well, no, it's the same thing. Can I have the conch shell, please? The thing is, we've got Tring School, which are telling everybody they're embarking on a complete rebuild programme and sort of minor expansion, which is very good to hear, and they've put a lot of effort into it, and it's looking very green. Now, that is now an academy. What influence have we got on the energy strategies of academy schools?
Okay, Julie?
Yes, excuse me, that is a very, very good point to raise. The work that we're doing at the moment very much focuses in terms of leader in our own operations. So that would be making sure we're looking at our own house, getting our own house in order first. Any guidance that we want to produce or we're seeking to produce to be able to engage and inform others, we would very much like that to then be taken on board by others, including academies. So we would like to work with academies as well as our own maintained schools, but we can't make people do anything. We very much like to share all of the knowledge and the information that we're sharing, that we're gathering, and Hearts for Learning are very much keen to wanting to pull together a catalogue of best practice so that we can share it with all of the schools to be able to say, you know, look at what that particular school has done or that particular school has done, so that they can share from each other, and hopefully they'll want to be able to pursue that particular agenda.
Okay, thank you, Julie. As we move forward, I think what I will do is ask Simon Newland if he wants to say a few words. But before we do that, Asif, thank you for your patience. Your question.
Thank you. Some of the points have been made, and can I thank you, Julie, for giving the presentation again. I think we were at a great meeting last week. So some of the points on page 22 of the action plan, where you ragged the various areas, and it's mentioned again clean air around schools, and there's a red rag there on in terms of is it the implementation,
deliverability?
Yeah,
yes.
Deliverability of that. And I just wondered, querying that about, I think it's very important, especially I'm an advocate of having no vehicles around schools at a particular time frame. So that forces parents and children to use public transport or to walk around there. So that interconnectivity to ensure that, you know, transport works with school policy, that works with, and that's where the local authority can have an impact, even in free schools and academies and so on. So it's about getting up a joined up approach. So just thinking about why that is difficult to implement, and I think that's something that really should be pushed. Lots of London boroughs have done it.
Yeah.
And are implementing it, so that's something to help with that. The other thing which I mentioned that gripe, I think it's important here, is about the supply chains and contracts that schools should have, a Herts County Council has, and the sustainability and the green way that they deliver. You know, for example, you know, our school transport still using rickety old polluting coaches that are diesel and dropping people off and on ? And these buses, I think that's important as well. But also supply chains in terms of catering. There's Herts Catering that comes in, and are they using the same things? Heating is, you mentioned when I was a school governor, heating was a real issue. Support schools needed, funding that they need, the expertise that they need. All of those things are challenges, and I think if we are going to see an implementation of this, we need schools to be supported, whether it's through cash or through advice, and getting more grants. I think that's key to make sure that this is implemented.
Okay, thank you. So the first point that you make on that specific action relating to air quality audits around schools, the deliverability is considered to be red for that particular one. I'll just explain the deliverability. This is about how easy it will be for us to be able to actually implement this action. And if it's solely within our control, then it's assumed to be a green. But then if it's less within our control, then it moves to amber and then red. The reason that this one's got a red is because it's not just us. It will need to be us and the district and borough councils and also the schools themselves. We've got issues with in terms of getting the air quality monitoring, so getting the monitors and resourcing the cost of the air quality collection data collection rather, and we have actually applied for funding from DEFRA. We hope to hear in January as to whether or not we've got that funding, and that funding is specifically to look at air quality data and collecting it across the county. So hopefully that will help us, fingers crossed, if we get that particular funding. So the reason that it's a red is because there are lots of difficulties in capturing the data and working with, as you said, partners and colleagues at schools. So, but it's not to say that we're not going to try. That's why it's identified in the action plan. In terms of supply chains, there's several actions in the action plan relating to procurement and sustainable procurement practices. And I was at a meeting with the LGA yesterday or day before, and they are putting together a very detailed toolkit to help local authorities with their procurement and their supply chains and assessing them relating to carbon and climate change. So I'm involved in developing that particular toolkit, and we've also got our own actions to look at that too. So that's definitely in there. And you're right in terms of buses, and that again, there's a multiple approach to that, in the sense that if we are looking at our own procurement mechanisms, then we take that into account. If we come to a particular updating of a contract or a supplier, we'd seek for them to put forward more sustainable options. And also the industry itself is having to change and decarbonise. So I think it will come from both angles for that particular point. Herts Catering, we, through the Leading by Example grouping that was in position before Sustainable Hertfordshire, we actually met with Herts Catering, I think it was in February, with the intention that, we would have a fantastic partnership arrangement. We'd be going out to schools and we'd be talking about anaerobic digesters and all sorts. And then, of course, COVID hit in March, and we haven't been able to engage with Herts Catering as we would have liked, as with the other school elements. It's definitely something we still want to do. And it's not just Herts Catering. There will be other providers as well. So you do want to make sure we work with all of those particular stakeholders. In terms of providing support for schools, yes, we absolutely want to support in terms of advice and guidance, and also help in terms of seeking funding through grants, Section 106 and Community Infrastructure Levy, for example, making sure we do get the correct amount of money as a service provider, but also helping them via the SALEX process, for example, where schools can apply for funding either through themselves or via the local authority. So we're definitely trying to help where we best possibly can to help schools to deliver on that particular agenda.
When I bring Simon Newland in, I might just ask Simon to say a little bit about SALEX and let people know perhaps a wee bit more about what they are or what they do and the impact that they can have for Hertfordshire. But in the meantime, let's go to Mark Watkin.
Thank you, Terry. Indeed. This is not an area that I claim expertise on, so I was really going to ask a couple of questions. One of them was about working with the academies, but just really about communication. First of all, you mentioned, Julie, working in districts in specific areas, but it seems to me this is an area where there ought to be some sort of joined up approach that goes right to the fundamentals of what we're trying to do, so the districts and the county, as much as can be, are talking the same language and setting themselves similar objectives, so that there's a consistency across the county if it can be achieved. Not easy, I fully understand, but I just wonder what that is, what work is going on in that area. In terms of communication, you mentioned presenting to governors. Absolutely right that you should. I wonder whether you are looking at the head teachers groups, the schools forum being an obvious one, but also there are head teacher groups which I think might deliver the message to the key decision makers probably quicker than going to the governors. I apologise, I don't want to be unkind to governors, but the head teachers live with their school problems every day. And just to be quite clear about new developments, we've been talking about new schools in this panel, and Terry, you mentioned PP 103 coming through later this year, but can we preempt that? Are we saying basically now anything that goes out as a new piece of build in the education sector, whether it's a free school or anything that we might want to do, will conform to the certain standards that we're looking to achieve? Thank you.
I'm going to pick up the last point that you make, Mark. Yes, obviously we want to have recognition of sustainable Hertfordshire, and we do have this pilot project in Buntingford with the first school, as I've mentioned. One of the problems is that unless you have a directive from central government in terms of the obligations placed upon the developers and the negotiation with the local planning authority, it's actually quite difficult. And it is going to be costly to build new schools to a net zero carbon. But there again, there are differentials between a full net zero carbon project and a net zero carbon operational project. And it may be that that's a part way that we will be able to go. I think it's also fair to say, and I hope I'm not stealing Simon's thunder here, that building methods are changing significantly, and older methods which may not necessarily have been as environmentally friendly and sustainable are being replaced with different methods of building, which actually make it less costly to achieve what we want it to achieve. I see a hand from Mark Mills Bishop, so bear with me, Simon. Your moment will come, and we'll also perhaps ask either Taryn or Michelle Murphy if there's anything that libraries can do, because there's something that I've got a suggestion in my mind. So, Mark, off you go.
Thank you, Chairman. You've preempted me. I was going to ask Julie about, we've heard about school buildings. Is there something about libraries? But you preempted it. And if Michelle is in the building, perhaps we can hear from them. But that was my question, libraries.
Well, there you go, telepathy. Let's come to libraries in a minute. But Simon, do you want to say a little bit about, if you like, the school's perspective on this, and also head teacher involvement, but also SALIX as well?
Yeah, thank you, Terry. I mean, there is a lot to talk about from the school's perspective, but I mean, the thing I thought I'd say first is the significance of partnership in this particular area. And Terry, I think you were talking about partnership with districts, and I think and that's significant in broad terms, but in particular in relation to schools, which are such a major factor in the sustainability debate. We need to develop our partnerships, not just with academies, which are wholly independent in various ways of the local authority, but with the diocese, who are responsible for voluntary aided schools, with those schools that are foundation schools and own their own buildings, and with the broad mass of community schools, which, unlike libraries, for example, are responsible for operating their own buildings and for many aspects of what happens within them. So kind of partnership is a key, is a kind of cornerstone of what we need to do with schools. But the framework that Julie talked about lead, enable and inspire is a useful one to think about the school's estate, because there are things that we need to do ourselves in a leadership role. There's an awful lot we can do in terms of enabling and helping schools, and that includes academies as well as non-academies. And then I think the inspire side of it, perhaps schools may be our key agency of all agencies in achieving that across the county, because as we all know, there are approaching 200,000 children in our schools. They have 250,000 parents, if not more, and there are 35,000 staff directly employed in schools. So that's a world where the inspiration side of things, the way in which we use schools and work with schools to inspire pupils, parents and local communities is a key thing. And I know many members are members of governing bodies, and I think members, have many important roles to play in this kind of inspiring world, and one of them is through their roles on governing bodies. So, I mean, the things that we are already doing, we've been doing for a year and a half, is with schools we agreed and funded a post in the energy management team, I think, to go out to schools and provide them with operational management support on how they can improve building efficiency. So that's a small thing, but it's a resource and it's happening. We've talked about the way in which our new buildings and our building specifications have changed and improved to give greater salience to environmental factors. And Terry mentioned the SALIX bid programme. And SALIX is a funding agency which has helped with energy efficiency, I suppose we'd call it, for many years. but mostly in the form of providing repayable loans to schools and other parties that want to spend money on their buildings. But Salix is now being used by the government to distribute grants, and every now and then you hear a reference to a large, I think a £1 billion sustainability fund that the government announced quite recently. And that's partly distributed through Salix, and Salix is now providing grant funding as opposed to loan funding to public bodies. That's really important because that's enabled us as a county to put in a large bid for Salix funding. And within that, I think there's about £20 million worth of schools related investment. And that investment is lined up with and complements some of the initiatives that we're now taking through the schools repairs and maintenance programme. And included in that are certainly air source heat pump proposals, which I'm sure Nick will be pleased to hear. Whether there's any ground source ones, I don't know, but as Julie said, it is, you know, the technology that's most appropriate to any particular building form. So we're active in terms of helping schools. We're active in terms of our investment programme already. And we would very much like to engage with schools on the Inspire side of things. We had planned with HFL a fairly substantial conference last summer to engage with pupils and with schools about all the different things that could be done. That has been shelved because of COVID, but HFL have commissioned somebody, and this is their own corporate initiative, to start to gather examples of good practice from schools. So that's happening now, and that will inform what we hope will be a joint conference next summer. So I think schools are centrally important to the sustainability agenda. They're different from council-owned buildings. We need to adopt a different approach, a partnership approach, and that's what we're doing. But I also wanted to, I suppose, make the point that there is a vast amount to do, but we have now started, I think, quite seriously in a programme of work and activity to address what this huge challenge.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Simon. I am aware that within this portfolio, it's not just schools, but it's also libraries. So it may be that Taryn, Pearson Rose, or Michelle, if they are on watching in, may want to say something. But what I will throw out is, and it picks up a comment that Mark, I think, made about communication, is that perhaps once we are back in to full operation within our library service, we can look at having some sort of display, which Julie may be able to approve of, but a display to let people know, the importance of sustainability, and also what we are doing and what we plan to do in the short, medium and longer term, but to use our library facility as some form of exhibition going forward. But is Michelle or Taryn about?
Yes, Terry, I'm here. It's Michelle.
Hi, Michelle. Good morning.
Good morning.
Do you want to just make any comments about the role of libraries within sustainability?
Yes, certainly, and thank you for that opportunity. Much of what I can contribute has already in fact been mentioned throughout the discussion, which has been very interesting to follow. In the library service, if I take the infrastructure, libraries are of course part of the HCC estate and managed in that way. So we work very closely in libraries with our colleagues from growth and infrastructure on any projects, whether that's when we significantly refurbish our libraries, or indeed whether we're in a position of new builds. And in our Inspiring Library strategy, you will know that we have plans to replace our buildings where they're considered to be unsuitable and not fit for purpose, and that does give us an opportunity to address some of those sustainability issues that you've mentioned in relation to school buildings as well. So we are working with colleagues actively with that. A recent example I can give you is the upgrade to the LED lighting at Stevenage, for example. So whenever we're doing refurbishments or we're doing any significant building works, we are looking to make sure that we're doing that in line with the sustainability measures. We also have vehicle fleets within the library service in order to keep our logistics going and continuing to move our stock around. So, and we are also part of the vehicle replacement programme that the County Council runs. We recently looked at our delivery programme, and we have moved to smaller delivery vehicles and have recently taken out the 7.5 tonne vehicles, for example, the big lorries from our fleet, and we will continue to look at the vehicle replacement programme in line with those sustainability issues. We also working with colleagues from the technology department. So whenever there are technological things that we can do to improve sustainability. So we have a project currently in progress, which enables us to upgrade the public PCs that we have in libraries for people to access the People's Network. The latest upgrade will include energy saving measures. So that's good across our whole libraries estate. And it also means that those upgrades can happen remotely, which again has an impact on cutting down engineer visits to individual library sites. So that's partly, I think, would go into your business as usual category that you were talking about. Equally, our staff are engaged in all of the work that's being done to look at how staff can work more effectively. Not all our staff, of course, can work remotely, but those that can are part of the way that we work in the future programme. I was going to pick up the Inspire thread that was mentioned, because of course libraries are at the heart of communities, and we have a role to play in inspiring the communities that we serve. And absolutely, Terry, I would say that we can and should be promoting the council's work in this area with displays, hopefully interactive displays if at all possible. But there is another role that libraries play in terms of inspiration, and that is all of the activities and events that we can run to communicate with our public. We have a lot of events for children and young people, and Simon has already mentioned, and so did Simon Aries as well, the impact of getting children as advocates to make behavioural change in adults. And so we can work with our children's groups as well, and we can put events on, and we do put events on in order to inform people about the climate emergency. And we have partnerships with the wildlife trusts as well within the county. So we can and are part of this programme, both in our buildings, in our workforce, and indeed in the way that we communicate and embedded in communities.
Thank you very much. And I suppose I just also have to remind myself that we have the fantastic Hartswood Forest, which has been planted over and very close to Sandridge. I know it's a bit of a tangent to what you were just saying, but it's something which is very exciting. I think we've heard a great deal this morning, and it's been very interesting. And I thank Julie and all our contributors. We, I think, now have to come to the recommendation, and I'm aware that there may be people watching in. So I am going to just read it out, if I may, in case they haven't seen it. And it says, the panel are asked to recommend to Cabinet that Cabinet note Appendix A to the action plan as a list of actions to continue to embed climate change and sustainability into business as usual. Agree the actions identified as quick wins to be delivered within existing resources to progress and enable the subsequent actions in later sections of the plan. agree that further investigations be undertaken into the actions identified as key works programmes, actions subject to further investigation as they may require significant investment over the next 5 to 10 years, and that these should be progressed as a matter of urgency to enable future work programmes and decision making. Agree the actions identified as future work programmes to be subject to further scoping to fully understand the cost and potential carbon impact of implementing these actions. Agree the proposals to run a pilot scheme at an initial sum of £1.45 million to review options for moving heating in schools towards electrical options. Request that officers update the most appropriate panel on a progress in spring 2021. And finally, in total, the attached action plan be approved for service areas to implement where within existing budgets, and return to future cabinets where approval is needed for additional resources in order to meet the sustainable Hertfordshire ambitions. And on that basis, if I could ask you please to indicate your response to those recommendations by for, against, or abstain. I'm just waiting for confirmation. I think I know what the answer is going to be. Yep, thank you, Stephanie. So that is agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Just one, thank you all very much. I really appreciate. I think it's been all three topics this morning have been very stimulating, and I'm very grateful to you all and for everybody for their contributions. Just before we close the meeting, there's no other Part 1 business identified, and just to mention that the date of the next Education, Libraries and Localism panel in its own right is the 10th of February. But before we finish, and in wishing everybody a restful and happy Christmas, can I just put out a plea to everybody who may be watching, that as we approach Christmas, there will be clearly a wish to communicate and make contact with our friends and our loved ones and family. But just please, please, please remember, hands, face, space. Don't, whatever we do, let that which we have achieved, so far, don't let that go to waste. We need to beat this pandemic. We need to beat COVID, and that is it. And I would also, in terms of schools, just urge parents to make sure, please, I know how difficult it's going to be because they'll want to give each other a hug for Christmas, but just maintain your social distancing, because that's the way. If we don't, we will not beat this dreadful virus. So I just urge you, and I would hope everybody, if you want to put your cameras on and just wave in agreement with that statement, I would be delighted. Mark Mills Bishop has. I'm not quite sure what your. I think the meeting is closed, but I'm not sure what you're asking about, Mark. And there is no AOB. We don't have an AOB on the agenda. So perhaps you can take that up with Stephanie or with me outside the meeting.
That's the best news I've had all meeting, Terry. Thank you very much. Shut up.
And I just repeat, thank you. It's been a really good meeting. It's a privilege to have this role, and it's been a good meeting. And happy Christmas, and take good care. Thank you.
Yep. Happy Christmas.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas and season's greetings.
Happy New Year.
Who's got the bells? Who's got the bells jingling? Somebody's got bells jingling.